few more people to join.
Hi.
Hi Durga, how are you doing?
Uh, pulling
Bad
through,
question
pulling
this
through.
time.
Trying to smile real
Which
hard.
is a lot.
What?
Which is a lot to do in this time. Like it's been crazy,
Oh my
right?
God, my periods are so delayed. It's ridiculous. This month they're just like, I'm not coming out. The world is terrible. There's a virus going out. I'm not coming out.
Which is completely okay. But do you PMS a lot?
Do I PMS a lot? I don't know how to answer that question because, like I'm constantly in a state of dysphoria. So
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know the difference between PMS and this stuff anymore. Like it's just all part of the same thing. But my PMS is kind of
Right,
like the dysphoria just gets worse. That's what happens. It's like
right,
it's
right,
not the
right.
cramps or the pain or any of that stuff. It's more like, oh my God, like I'm really uncomfortable in my skin, you know? That's what
Huh,
happens.
huh. Thank you for sharing. Let's just wait for a couple more minutes for a little bit of a crowd to join
Mhm.
in, and then we'll get right into it. I have a lot of questions, and I'm very
Just get
excited for
right
this. I've
into
been
it,
waiting for this
yeah.
live
Get
for
right into it. There's a bunch of peeps already here, and a bunch of my friends are already here. I don't think they want to stare at our face for 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. ठीक है. So, first off, tell us a little bit about yourself, like what you do, how you identify, what's the journey been like to come to terms with your gender identity, and what's that whole graph like?
Uh, so the first time I was able to have, the first time I have a clear memory of me recognizing that I was clearly different from the other girls and boys around me. I was about
Hmm.
3 years old because it was junior KG. It
Wow.
was second day of junior KG because first day of junior KG everyone was crying. So I mean I was couldn't think about anything. But second day I remember this friend of mine, her name was Krutika, and
Huh.
I asked her, I was like, why is everyone in shorts going to that bathroom and why are we in pinafores going through this one? And she said it's because we have a hole and they have a pipe. And she didn't realize it was really profound actually to think about it. Like it's like so simple. I was like, what? That makes
Yeah.
no sense. Like it made no sense to me that day. And it never made sense to me even after that, right? Because I was just like,
After. Hmm.
what is this? Like it's literally that. Like my first conversation about private parts with anyone was this. We are different because they have a pipe and we have a hole. And so I like remember that, but even before that, I have memories of looking at myself and actually like in the mirror and seeing the reflection of my face like look different every time I looked in the mirror. You know, it was something either it's like I'm
Hmm.
observing something that is beyond what I see in the first glance. And so
Hmm.
I didn't understand. And I used to like, I had this question of like, who am I and what am I? More than who am I, what am I? You know?
Right.
Since I was a
Right.
very young kid and I didn't really have a place to talk about these things, or even when I tried to talk about these things, it was people were like, what are you thinking? What are you saying? You know? And there was
Yeah.
no literature
Yeah.
around it or anything. Just 1 second, I want to say, hi, Mama. My drag mother Sushant Devgikar is here, has joined this call, this live session. Thank you for being here, Mother. I love you. Your support means the world. I just want to tell everyone here, it's like the reason why I am so much more comfortable in myself. One of the main people who has given me strength is Sushant. So I have to say that out
I'm
loudly.
so glad.
But
I'm
so getting
so
back to what
glad.
I was saying, I actually Let me show you this, but I have this crate under my table right here. Okay. It's a big crate.
Huh.
It's full of my writing. It's just books and books and books and books of me talking to myself about all of the stuff that I was going through as a child. So I started doing this since I
Ah.
was 11 years old. And
Oh my goodness.
so I go back to them, I make notes, and I'm going to read out something for you from this time. Okay, let's pick. It's like any random page that you pick, it's like I'm looking at gender, I'm looking at religion, I'm like, it's just one mess in my head that's like comes out all the time. But
Huh.
I want to read a small part about, like a small section from this particular book because it's relevant to
Mhm.
like what I was just talking about. So here.
Yeah, yeah.
The images in my head are not letting me rest. How could I have gone so many days completely oblivious about so many things in the world? Have I shut down or have I stopped caring? I do not feel shallow and I do not feel deep. I feel locked. When a dear one who you rely on does not understand your needs, you feel so terrible. What about all those people who face resentment every day, abandonment every day? Why can't I see my joy when they are right in front of me? Am I blinded from everything real? Or do I have to feel like this to be able to digest reality in the first place? Is it worth being a good for nothing person who does not make a difference to the world? Or is it a good thing to be digesting things like that every day? Every time I have an urge to write, why am I always in this state of mind? I feel very blocked in my head and I'm finding it hard to breathe. Does anyone live like this? How do I make this better? Can no one make it better other than my mother's hugs and touch? I hope this will not pass me by because is tomorrow really a better day? Have I changed so much? Is it too much to be true? Or am I running away? And this is like a gist of almost every piece of writing. And if you speak to another dysphoric person, like these feelings that I'm describing are something that are very consistent with someone who finds disassociation in their gender. All right.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
the thing is, the fact is that how can someone write for so many years about something that the world apparently doesn't seem to even identify, right? And yeah, and so
Acknowledge, yeah.
that's how I actually got to the place that I am now, is like writing like this for the last 15 years, and really paying attention to my emotions and paying attention to how I'm processing them and how I'm moving to a place that is further and forward. And it is human tendency to like seek for comfort, right? Like it's something that all of us naturally do. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
when a person who faces like gender dysphoria, it's like to seek comfort in your own body. It's the only thing that you are born with and you die with, you know. If that
Yeah,
becomes
yeah,
feels like so locked and like a prison all the time, it then becomes harder and harder to exist in a world that constantly reassures you.
reinforces
No,
that.
it reassures you that there is definitely something wrong with you. Like it's not even like about affirmation. It's like literally they just constantly there's every signal every day in every sentence that tells you that you are
Yeah,
not what you think
yeah,
you are, and we will not refer to you in the way that you feel comfortable, or the world doesn't have a space for even like for example something as simple as like on a form that I'm filling for an application, for me to
mm,
write, there's no option. And honestly, like I keep telling people, like just leave the gender space blank. You'll collect so much data about gender
yeah, yeah,
because people know their own gender. You don't have to say male, female.
Yeah.
You can just say, what is your gender? I know I'll put it in. And so there are like all of these kinds of sort of conversations that I've had with myself over the years again and again and again and again and again and again. And then when I was exposed to uh, an environment which actually nurtured my skills, nurtured my talents, and I was rewarded
Hmm.
and praised for the sculptor that I am, the artist that I am, and the person that I am. And like, if I'm a sculptor by training, so I mean, when I was in college, I studied in the Rhode Island School of Design, and my classmates, the guys, a lot of times, so first of all, they used to call me the big D because they were like, your personality is so big. They can't say your name, so we can call you Big D. And they would always ask me for help when there was any heavy lifting to be done. So they'd be like, hey, D, like,
Hmm.
I want to transport this 8 foot, sheet of metal. Can you help me? Rather than asking a dude, they would ask me, sometimes. And I was like, that feels nice. That felt nice. And
Yeah.
also, there were lots of people around me who were figuring their gender out, figuring life out, and just being themselves unapologetically. And I'm grateful for those like 3.5 years in my life that I was there, because that has actually given me the strength to believe in my word, believe in what I say to myself, and also believe in the experiences that I go through, because it's so easy to feel like this is all in my head, but it's not, you know?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, for those who don't know me, let me specify. I identify as a trans non-binary gender fluid person, and I'm born and assigned female at birth, which means I was born with a womb, but I identify with my womb and I do not identify with my breasts. So that's me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Great. And this brings me to my next
Mhm.
question, that for anybody who falls on a spectrum of gender which isn't cis
Mhm.
female, what is the experience of menstruation like? Because it is, of like you said, a reminder, right, of the fact uh, that you don't feel comfortable in your
Yeah,
body.
so the thing is that, okay, I'll be honest with you, like my periods have always been really weird and funny. And well, actually,
Huh.
it's not funny, it's painful. But it's been like I've just like, so I started bleeding when I was 11 years old, all right? So
Huh.
the time I started bleeding, I was the youngest in my batch, first of all. And on top of that, I was the first one to start bleeding. And I was one of the first people to develop breasts. And I couldn't talk about it to anyone, right? 11 years old. And at that point, uh, my parents were like, don't talk about this to anyone. So,
Hmm.
I mean, there was a lot of shame surrounding it. And also, being Indian, and coming from like a Hindu family, I don't identify as a Hindu, just making that clear, but I identify as spiritual. But, you know, grandparents, I grew up with my grandparents, and they had these rules like when you're bleeding, you don't go in to pray. And
Yeah.
so I never understood it. I was like, if I'm bleeding because I have the ability to give birth, and that is God. Creation is God, right? So there's like, if I have a womb, there's something divine inside me that allows me to be here, and that has given me life or whatever. But like, it doesn't feel fair that all of these signs are telling me that there's something wrong with this, or that there's something impure about this, because there's nothing impure about this. This is normal.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would actually, and my dysphoria would manifest with my period. So like when I first started bleeding, I would bleed for 40 days in a row. And I'd not bleed for 2 months, and I'd bleed for 40 days, and I'd not bleed for 2 months, and bleed for 40 days, and bleed for 2 months. And that was my cycle. That was my regular cycle from the age of 11 to 21. So,
Oh my Lord.
so yeah, so that's what happens. It's like, every single person who bleeds knows that stress manifests itself. So,
Absolutely.
but when the stress level from the conversation around, menstruation, when that stress level manifests in a dysphoric person who is expected to now be a woman, it's crazy. And oh, someone said, hope you are alive. So there was, when I was 21, this was the big wake up call for me actually. I was 21 and I woke up one night feeling like I wet the bed. And I took out the covers. And you know that scene from like Godfather, the horse head? Like that was like what I saw. And I really freaked out. And I went to, this was in America. I was in America at that time. I went to, the clinic and I said, please, can you check me out and see what's up? And they said, if you are changing a tampon or a sanitary napkin once every hour, you need to go to the hospital. Like, there's something seriously wrong
Hmm.
here. We need to figure this out. But they also told me that it was because of high stress levels and I needed to regulate my sleep and all of this stuff. So, like this was right before winter break. And I came back to India and I got on birth control. So I got on the
Hmm.
lowest dose of birth control, but that like actually I could feel my body changing. Like I could feel my curves and get accentuated. I could feel my breasts getting bigger, which were even more uncomfortable on my body. And on top of that, I had such crazy mood swings because I was like super emotional all the time. And I'm anyways emotional. So it was just like a mess. I was a mess for those 4 months. And I decided, I was like, you know what? I did a lot more research in those 4 months while I was on birth control about stress, regulating stress, and all of that stuff. And I started
Hmm.
working towards that. And once I started working towards that, and at the same time, like I was understanding my identity, my gender, or whatever, my association to my body. So from the age of 21, I'm 27, but from the age of 21 onwards to now, what I've realized is that they tell you 28 days is what your cycle is supposed to be. If it's above or below that, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's not. The thing is that your cycle
Yeah.
needs to be regular. Some people have a 28-day
Correct.
cycle. Some people might have a 40-day cycle. Some people might have a 50-day cycle.
Yeah.
But everybody has a
Correct.
cycle. And so I realized once I started using apps and creating like data, like for myself to see when I'm bleeding, what's going on and all of that, what are the symptoms that I'm facing, and storing all of that and that, I started to be able to identify the differences between the experience of females and mine. It's different.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so now my period is a 55-day cycle. 50 to 55,
Hmm.
45 to 55 day cycle actually. So it's actually like I bleed for 1 month, like I have a normal period for 1 month, which is like 5 to 7 days. And the next month I don't bleed. So if you look at it like monthly, it's 1 month I bleed, 1 month I don't bleed. 1 month I bleed, 1 month I don't bleed. And so now that's what my cycle has turned into. And that will also further
Hmm.
change in time because I have decided to go through top surgery, which is I'm going to have a mastectomy, double mastectomy, and get my breast removed. Just so you all know, I have had a lot of intervention and therapy and gone to the psychiatrist for several years to be able to figure out and come to that decision that I actually need that surgery to be comfortable in my skin because I completely disassociate with them. So when someone takes out their breasts as well, it affects the estrogen levels in your body. And so
Absolutely.
because there are some glands in there as well. So my appearance, even if
Yeah.
I'm not taking testosterone, even if I'm not going through hormone replacement therapy, um, there will be physical changes even to my face. I will
Hmm.
probably have some more chin hair, which I'm really looking forward to. And but I'm not going to stop bleeding, you know. And it's not
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
I want to stop doing either. Like, sure, if I didn't have my periods, great. But The fact that they are there and the fact that I bleed now doesn't bother me, because now I don't make it mean that I am a woman. I don't make it mean that, oh, I'm bleeding
Yeah,
because I didn't make a baby this month. I'm bleeding
yeah,
because I have a wound. That's it. That's how I now think and now see it. And there's a lot of comfort in that. There's a lot of comfort in knowing for myself that just because I have a womb doesn't mean that I'm a woman and I don't want to live a woman's life,
correct,
you know. And so,
correct,
so
correct.
for everyone listening, if there are any young trans people out there, I want you to know that, for a lot of them, just the act of bleeding can be very, very difficult and extremely like incapacitating, and I
Yeah,
have gone through those times in my life, but it is possible to not let it take over you. It is possible to get to a place where
yeah,
those 5 days or 10 days are not like that stressful for you. It's part of your life and it comes and it goes, and you have no control over it. So when you look at it like that, your stress levels reduce in relation to this one particular thing that adds to your dysphoria. And, it helps
yeah.
regulate just by talking to oneself. And yeah.
I'm really, really glad. I hope somebody who's listening sort of finds comfort in what you're saying, because it can be very, very helpful to hear it from somebody from the community rather than like, people outside the community just talking for them and like appropriating voices
Yeah,
essentially.
and I got
Yeah,
a message on my Instagram once saying, someone says, please save this life. So,
I will try
so
to. Yes.
basically, I was on, forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, I was on a panel discussion with someone
Huh.
um, who's also an activist and is also gender fluid. And they actually told, when we were on the live session together, they actually told me that, hey man, when I started bleeding, I had 40-day periods too. I was shocked because the number was exact. We both had 40-day periods, and it was the first time I heard someone who actually said, like, for a very long time, yeah, I used to bleed for 40 days. And the thing is that what we didn't understand while I was going through all of these things is the fact that I was an athlete. I was a star athlete in my school. So I used to skate, I used to run, I used to throw, I used to like, jump, I used to play basketball, football, kabaddi, kho, everything. Like I was really active and like it's always like elected games, prefect or whatever. So school was I used to always compete like district level, state level, national level. From when I was a really small kid. But once I started bleeding, it started affecting my even performance sports wise.
Performance.
And
Mm,
the heavier my breasts were, the slower I became in my sprints. And it used to really bother me. It's
mm,
like, what is going on right now? Like, this is not okay.
yeah.
And yeah, and I guess the way I knew very well, like, that I was trying to respond to situations in the way that I'm expected to, not in the way that I want to.
Yeah. Wanted to. Mm,
And so I saw that very big difference between me and women around me, girls around me.
mm,
Because for a lot of them, it was just like, yeah, this is, yeah, normal, you know. For me, it was like, but aren't you
mm.
guys thinking about all of these different things? Like, aren't you thinking about the fact that, like, now we have to like have this secret? Why do we have this secret? Like, because we didn't bleed, all these men are also born. No, like, like that's why they are born, is because you missed your period. That's the only they need to know, like, the reason why they were born, like
Yeah.
how that mechanism works, and even the way that sex education is taught and in school and stuff like that. It's like all of us. It's like they had a seminar, and when it comes to the topic of periods, all the boys are asked to leave, including the male teachers. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
why are we ashamed of this? I mean, in biology class, so you're going to make diagrams only, na, on the board and talk about the same thing. But here you want to create this like environment of shame around it. And so I don't know. Like there's just all these questions like always baffled me, and I guess now I've been talking about them and putting them to the forefront more and more.
Yeah, yeah. And all of this, like, all of these systems that create period shame are so ingrained in how we perceive the educational system
Mm-hmm.
itself, is that to challenge it is a task, and it's so humongous that so many people have tried and failed. And I just hope that that sex ed becomes more responsible in times to come. It's a very desperate situation
Yeah.
right now. But coming to the campaign itself and what the core
Mm-hmm.
of our conversation is. So just to brief anybody who's watching, we're running a campaign called Periods
Mm-hmm.
and Patrikars. Okay, and this is the attempt is to develop a toolkit of reporting guidelines for journalists to do a more responsible, inclusive job of reporting on menstruation, which means including the perspectives of the margins of menstruators, not just cis female, able bodied
Mm-hmm.
menstruators, right? So that is the reason we're having these conversations with people from different intersections like these. So before we get into menstruation related news as such, I want to understand what your thoughts are about the media landscape in general and how it works in India.
Trying to take my livelihood away from me or what? The COVID times, that's the only way I'm making money, dude. What is this? No, I mean, I'll just say what I say. One second, let me get some light. I was gonna say what I say, like about this. This is not just about India; it's about everywhere in the world. You know,
Absolutely.
we have to think about power. We have to think about history and how those two go hand in hand. Now, before media became accessible in the way that it is right now, what was media? It was books, it was history, it was writing, it was people's accounts and notes and perspectives written in the form of whatever they perceived at that point from their perspectives. And
Yeah.
usually the perspective of the
Yeah.
victors, you know. And we all know this. It's
Mm.
like only the winners write history. The people who lost don't have,
Yeah.
never had the yeah,
Avenues, I
or
guess.
they were not in a position to, right? They were not in a position of power to
Yeah.
assert their ideologies,
Yeah.
assert their ideas in the world.
Yeah.
And so that is the nature, no matter how accessible things get. That is the nature of information. That is the nature of creating history, geography, whatever, not geography, history. And what I think is that the way that media operates anywhere in the world, it's only now when we have the capacity to put out our own content as individuals, is when trans people, the conversation around being transgender in the whole world has become has come to the forefront, and all the like so many trans activists all over the world are speaking up, so many non-binary people are speaking up more and more every single day. It's not just like it's in the last 5 years that there's been a huge shift in the way that we are talking about being trans, being non-binary, and talking about self-identification, talking about like, I mean, people were talking about self-identification before that, but what I'm saying is that the need for it, the sort of like drive that is pushing it a lot is come like in the last 5 years internationally, worldwide, not just in India. And
Mm. Mm.
and so, I mean, more and more, whether it is in the form of trends, whether it is in the form of like TV shows, whether it is in the form of like drag or mainstream, reality shows, this, whatever, I don't like, I just want, like, my dream is I just want to see as many trans people, at some point. Like one day we were there.
Durga, we lost you for a second there. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I said my dream is to see as many trans people as we see men. on screen before the day I die. That's my dream. I want to see that. I want to see that happen. And even if I don't, that's fine. That's still a goal. It's not fine. Let me correct that. It needs to happen, but it's still a goal. And I am working tirelessly towards that. So many trans and queer people are working tirelessly towards that. And um, I'm really glad that you're doing this campaign and also for including me because it's trans people have a hard time talking about their period experiences. It's even the conversation is very dysphoric and uncomfortable. And I
Yeah,
only realize like now that I need to have that conversation and I need to like talk about this more and more so that I'm voicing the concerns of people that aren't heard enough. And so, oh, I remember one point I
yeah,
was going to make. There was someone who wrote a message to me on Instagram. This 18-year-old, 19-year-old young person who had bought their first menstrual cup, non-binary person. And you know, the menstrual cup forces you to explore your vagina in a way, yeah, anatomy in a
anatomy.
way
Yeah,
that a tampon doesn't. Even if you don't have the applicator on a tampon, it still doesn't. It takes 2 seconds and that's done. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't, it's not a
yeah,
15-minute process. And to make sure everything is
correct.
sealed and done and then you're good to go. And it's in
Huh.
the perfect place or whatever. Because there's still a lot of kinks that need to be worked out in the design in terms of like if you compare it to a tampon with an applicator, just the pinch, like the applicators, those are so much easier to use, even if they are internal. And personally, for me, they don't cause so much dysphoria. But looking at the environment effects of all of this stuff, like, uh, sorry, I was just reading that question. I will truly know
Yeah,
madly, I will answer that in 1 second. But I'm just saying that we need to think about this. People who are making menstrual cups, they're talking about sustainability in being a sustainable menstruator and stuff like that. Like even in the design, like I want to be like involved in designing these menstrual cups, designing things around them because I know what it feels like. I don't. I mean, the first time I wore it, I was so stressed out. I couldn't feel it inside me, but I was so stressed out that I was like just clenching the whole time. And like after 2, 3 months, sure, like it did become easier, and I'm still trying to get used to it. I don't know if it's the right size. I don't know. Like there is no clear way of knowing if it is the right size or if it is just hurting you. No one, like I had to do a lot of research to understand that the stem is not really that important. I can just cut it and it won't like
correct.
poke at me,
Yeah,
So there are like all of these like
yeah,
small things that are not talked about, and someone's dysphoria is just not considered in the aspect of designing it at all. Because if it was, then it wouldn't
correct,
be that uncomfortable and leave me
correct.
in a disconnected state with my own body for days. And so I've been posting about using the
Yeah,
menstrual cup and all of that stuff. But like the minute it arrived, I opened it, it was pink. I was like, what is this? Like, this is so ugly. Like, I don't want this color. Why isn't it like purple? Why isn't it black? You know what I mean? Like the options, there are a few companies who are doing that, who are changing the colors and stuff like that. But the first one that I ordered many, many months ago, it was like I ordered the one that I thought it was right before the lockdown. So I was thinking, I was like, I should get the cup before the lockdown, you know, so that I don't have to worry about
yeah.
access to these kinds of things.
Huh.
But yeah, I'm still confused about I got a medium cup, but I'm like, I think I should get a small or an extra small. I don't know. Like, I'm so confused. The medium is definitely not working. So,
So we will definitely like I've told you this before also when we've talked privately that if you're facing issues then just like reach out and we will like try to figure it out. We may fail, we may succeed, but we can at least try together. So of course, like I'd be happy to have a conversation about this. I think let's quickly address Sharanya's
Mm-hmm.
question, which was, is it insensitive to ask someone's pronouns directly, and what pronouns do you suggest you use right off the bat when talking about somebody who's non-binary?
Just don't assume, like that's what I would say. Is just don't assume anything ever. There is no right or wrong way to address a person. The only way you'll find answer to that question is like you have to ask the individual. So I would just say that
Yeah,
even if they have to take a second to tell you what their pronouns are, I assure you that a trans or non-binary person would prefer you asking them, hey, I thought I should ask you before I misgender you by mistake or because of my conditioning. Can you please tell me what your preferred pronouns are? How do you like to be referred? The best way is
yeah,
like what I do is I just say, when I meet anyone, I'd say, how do you like to be addressed? And so let's do
yeah.
that exercise. Hi, I'm Durga. My pronouns are they and them. How do you like to be addressed? You know,
Mm,
I do that. But if you're
yeah,
not a non-binary person, like you can just be like, hey, my name is whatever. And how do you like to be addressed? Like if you are asking a question about pronouns and you mention your own pronouns before asking that question, it becomes a little bit easier to have that
yeah,
conversation. So even if you're very
yeah.
obviously cis het woman, female, she, her, which fits into a box,
Huh,
if you come to me and say, hi, my
huh.
pronouns are she and her, like what are your pronouns? I'm going to smile for a second
Yeah,
and be like, this person had the
yeah,
sensitivity to think about this. Good, that's progress.
yeah,
And
yeah,
also, like, even if you misgender a person, if you catch yourself every single time, like you make an effort, like the person can see that you're making an effort. You don't let it just slip off your mind. Like what I do with my friends is that, or with anybody, is that before I have a conversation, I say that, listen, can you imagine what it would be like if I misgendered you 250 times in this conversation? Because I get misgendered 250 times a day. I counted with a clicker. And so I like, no, seriously, I wanted to know that number to make this point because can you imagine how can you function? Like if I call you he in your workplace, everyone calls you he, like you're gonna
uh,
be like, you don't even see me or what? Like who are you talking to? You're not talking to me. You're talking to
yeah,
an idea of me that you think is
correct.
convenient to address for you. But you're not really
For you,
talking to
yeah,
this person that is standing in front of you. And so,
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah,
and so like it is important. Like what I do is I will correct people. A lot of people don't like it's a lot of effort to correct people. Yeah, if I'm misgendered 250 times, I'm correcting 250 times also, you know. So, but I mean, but I'm kind of stubborn like that. I make it a point to do it. People, and of course, there are people who don't want to do it. If someone corrects you, if there's a trans person and you can see that you are referring to that person in their pronoun, when you're approaching that word as you are speaking.
yeah,
Even if you misgender that person
yeah,
in that moment, if you stop and you correct it right then and there, what you're essentially doing is reprogramming your brain because it is your conditioning and my
yeah,
conditioning that makes us
yeah,
refer to people in the wrong pronoun even after knowing the reasons why. It's conditioning. It's a muscle. Your
yeah,
brain's a muscle. It's been trained
absolutely,
to
yeah.
listen to visual, audio, like all your sensory, you're taking in stimuli
Stimulate,
and you're responding to that. And your pronoun that you're using to refer to that
yeah,
particular person is a response to stimuli, right? Like, so even my
yeah,
friends, um, when they speak to me, they have a hard time calling me they every time because of my voice. Like when they hear my
mm,
voice, a lot of people just automatically their brain goes to she and they like find it like the minute
yeah,
they start catching themselves, they start seeing how ingrained it is in our system.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's what's like been interesting for me to observe. But me correcting people, and the same friends will have no problem talking about me like behind my back with the correct pronouns, which they do, and which is important. Like people need to know when you talk about someone behind their back, you have to use the right
Yes.
pronouns because again,
Right.
you're talking
Pronouns.
about
Absolutely.
them. You refer to
Absolutely.
them in the way that they want to be addressed. Otherwise, you are not talking to them or you're not talking about them. Simple. You're talking about or to
Yeah.
the idea of that person that you assume. And that stinks. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with you. And just, I personally am the kind of person who's always interjecting people when they say he or she left their bag here. When they just automatically say he or she, I like keep interjecting and say it could be a them, or it could be a
yeah.
zer, or it could be whatever it is. And they get like people get agitated. So I mean,
Yeah.
but I still try. So yeah, so now I think I've got like 4 5 people to consider a day, and I think that is progress. So I'm, yeah, just
Yeah, definitely. And the
sharing.
progress happens from representation, right? Like now, the more people talk about it. And what I also want people, like other younger queer people to know is that it's not on you to explain to the world. It's not on you to be running around for your rights. It's not on you to educate the world about it.
Yeah.
I do it for a
Yes.
very specific
Yes.
reason. It's because I wrote all those books, man. I have so much content. Like, okay, it's actually no, it's actually for my younger self. Like I needed when I was a kid, I needed the person I am today to exist as this person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the only reason I do what I do is little Durga needs to be proud of me every single day. That's all. Tell myself I'm like
Beautiful.
Durga, you have to make little Durga's dreams come true. You can't just sit around, get up. Like let's do this.
That is beautiful. Beautiful. And you mentioned here that for some people, even the experience that they bleed can be extremely dysphoric for people who have not made their peace with it, or are in
Even if
general
they
like it's
made their
something that
peace
is
with it,
triggering for
now it
them.
can be like terrifying,
Triggering,
triggering
yeah.
also. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then in that case, I think one constraint that I know other menstrual health educators who struggle with reaching out to this audience group, because we know that it is difficult for them to talk about it, and we don't want to put them in that position, in that uncomfortable position where it's bringing up something that is triggering for them, or something that is bringing up their dysphoria. So then how do you suggest that people like researchers interview trans people more sensitively?
Go to a trans activist and give them the job. Like saying just
Sorry,
go to like I
I
was
lost your
saying
voice.
go to a trans person and give them the job. Like what I'm like when you talk about inclusion, right? Like people need to understand that the way equality comes to being is the people who are not in a position of power, they need to be uplifted. They need to be next to you.
Correct.
You can't be
Correct.
in a position on top being like, I am pulling you up, you know. It
Yeah,
needs to be in a place where I don't have the experience to know what to do for this. You have the experience
yeah,
to know what to do for this. This is how we will compensate you for your time exactly the way that we do for every other cis het person in here and not expect
yeah,
you to show up because we are doing you a favor by representing and giving
yeah,
you a platform. You know, it has to be
yeah,
we need a trans person to design this thing. Like, we
yeah,
need a trans person who is skilled and trained in design, who has work experience, who has the qualification to do this. Because no matter how much anyone tries, like the person just won't have the perspective to be able to do it. You can't imagine someone else's, because especially a
Absolutely.
minority, like you cannot imagine the life of a minority and represent it the way you want, you know.
Yeah.
So I actually reached out to someone as well who works with menstruation. I'm glad we are having this conversation, but I just say this outright. Like, I'm someone who, like, I've studied art and design. I've even been visiting faculty at Parsons at design school, at a very young age. Like, someone who understands inclusive design and fine art. And I have an aesthetic sense, understanding of form, structure, how things work, materials. I'm a sculptor. And so it's like, guys, you want to
Yeah.
build a product like with me properly, like I have the tools to build it, you know. I have the credentials to
Yeah.
build it, I have the skills to build it, but who
Yeah.
like if there are people who are having these conversations and then doing things around branding, but it is not
Yeah.
going into the ideology, it is not going into the form, it is not like that sensitivity that it needs, the whole process needs to be done. It's just not considering these
Correct.
things. So if I reach out to trans people saying, hey, I'm designing a product, can you please fill out a survey form, or can I interview you, you know they'd be happier to do that. They'd be
Yeah.
happier to talk to me about it. They would
Yeah.
be like, some of them would be ashamed to talk to a woman about it. They'd be ashamed or embarrassed, like really being like,
Yeah.
in this
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation, is this woman going to make me feel like a woman? Because a lot of times, like, even if people say they are well meaning or whatever, like a lot of women can say and do things that are just unacceptable. Like, especially in terms of like menstruation, you cannot compare a woman's menstrual experience to a trans person's menstrual experience. They're completely different socially, you know, and personally. So,
Yeah.
for example, there are like trans men who go through hormone replacement surgery, therapy, and they also go through surgery and all of that stuff to be comfortable in their skin and align their soul to their body, or they align their body to their soul. And then there is a time when they have to go to a chemist and buy sanitary napkins, because sometimes, like a lot of times, they don't stop bleeding, or they might bleed rarely, or the effects of
Yeah.
hormone replacement therapy are different on different individuals. All right, like there's complications that can happen, like any intervention, any medical intervention. There are complications that can happen. But what I'm like, appearance is fully of a man. Okay. And I think I lost you there. Hello? Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah,
see
you
me?
keep going off and coming back. So yeah, I was saying, lost my train of thought again. What was I saying? What was I saying, man?
You were talking about how they have to go
Oh,
buy a
yeah, yeah,
sanitary
yeah.
pad.
So if I have the appearance of a man, just imagine, like, full beard and everything, and I go to buy like a sanitary napkin, whatever thing. I mean, it's like sometimes, like if you are in a difficult area or whatever, like sometimes these people in shops also might give you trouble. They might be like, why do you want it? Or something like, you know what I mean? Like there can be those situations that happen that may not seem like
Yeah.
a big deal to cishet people.
Yeah.
But that question is not that one question you get. It's that same question you get every day,
Yeah.
the minute you own yourself.
Yeah.
And so I've been told that it gets harder before it gets easier. But like,
I hope. I mean, I don't want it to get harder, but I do want it to get easier at some
no, I
point.
mean, I'm talking about like coming out as a trans person. Like, it definitely is like that. It does
Yeah.
get harder before it gets easier. Like a lot of it, there's so much. 'Cause if you think about like a person who is cis, their memories of their childhood and stuff, they'll remember a lot of good memories. They'll remember themselves in context to their friends. But for trans people, like most of our childhood memories are of feeling different, are of feeling pain, are of like really difficult things that we have faced and happened to us, or like it is memory of that discomfort, and that memory of that discomfort is what you carry in your body every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having like
Yeah.
when you talk about like inclusive design, not just talking about the boxes of like product design, graphic design, copywriting. There are all of these are like the boxes in a company that produces the products, right? Like these are the
Correct.
slots that they divide people in groups to work on. But who is that one person in the end who has the last word on the whole design or whatever?
Yeah.
Who is that person? That person's not
Yeah.
trans.
Yeah. That person is usually cis het male.
Mm.
And
Mm.
final question, I think we're running out of
Mm.
time a little bit. So my last question to you is, when we're talking about reportage and menstruation, when we're talking about the inclusion of the trans experience of menstruation in such reportage, what do you think is absolutely necessary for it to reflect? Besides just the mention of, that there are trans people who menstruate. I think that's the extent of whatever coverage there is about trans people who menstruate.
This question that you asked me, that's a business idea. Like it's not a question I can answer like in one this thing. It's like it needs to be a it needs to be a different thing. Like there needs to be something specifically. Like I felt the need for that when I started having these conversations. I was like, yeah, man, I feel it'd be great if there was something specific. Like what if I could design a menstrual cup? Not what if, like I intend to design a menstrual cup that or like any kind of like something, even you have reusable pads and all of these things, right? Like there are lots of different ways that I'm going to try out and see that what is going to work. And
Uh,
actually at some point I really want a product that is for trans people, specifically for trans people who bleed,
yeah.
and I feel like that's an entire different section of product design that and marketing and branding and all of that needs to come into the industry of menstrual care. It can't just be
Yeah.
we are now going to be more conscious about how we market this. Instead of using blue dye, we will use pomegranate juice, like there's that
Yeah.
switch is happening. And it's great. I'm not
Yeah.
stepping on anyone's toes, or I'm not like being condescending towards any kind of changes that are already happening. I appreciate them a lot. It's just that as a trans person, I will speak for all trans people, is that it's not enough. Whatever there is, whatever this
Absolutely.
world is for trans people is not enough.
Yeah.
Nothing that has been
Yeah.
done towards trans people has ever been enough. So anyone who like comes and says, I don't have an issue with trans people, I'm like, yo, like you can't just say I don't have an issue with trans people and not actively talk about trans rights. You can't do that. You're not on my team then.
Yeah.
If you're on my
Yeah.
team, that means you're going to call people out when you don't have to.
Yeah.
Well, even if it makes that
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
uncomfortable, like you would be like, no, dude, you like we are in a different place. Trans people are in a different place in society. Like we cannot be talking about this issue like this. We don't have the right to talk about it. We have the
Yeah.
We are supposed to shut up and listen. We can't talk about it anymore. I want that
Yeah.
realization to come to cis people in general, but I want that realization to happen to all the women who are trying their level best to change the way that menstrual care is like looked at. Like I want all those women to listen to me and like understand that you guys can't be making the decisions. You cannot be making the decisions on the branding. You have to involve a trans person. You have to involve a non-binary person. And
Yeah.
I'm not speaking on behalf of trans women, but I just want to iterate a point that I have heard over and over again from trans women is that like the way branding is done around menstrual care is very exclusive of trans women, right? It makes them feel like they're not women. That becomes another
Yeah.
reason for them to feel like I am not a woman. It's like women bleed, and
Yeah.
then that's that. So
Yeah.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not a trans woman, so I will not speak for a trans woman, but I just wanted to point
Speak for
this
them. Yeah.
out that that is a whole different conversation that we need to have.
Correct.
Like, even when making
Yeah.
decisions about products and brandings and all of these things, can you imagine if a trans person who bleeds and a trans person who doesn't bleed are working on this together, and the amount of sensitivity that they would work on this with will
Yeah.
seem like a lot of constriction, like a lot of conflict for a lot of people who have been working in this field and who've been making these
Yeah.
products. But it's only through
Yeah.
that that change will happen. We need to be in that place
Yeah.
where we're making the decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for wrapping it up with that note that it is, I agree completely that they have to be part of the process and not just a token.
Yeah.
So I completely understand. And I'm really grateful for you being so vulnerable and so open to sharing your perspectives and sharing what you've written. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I know you took
Same.
out time not feeling great, so
I
that's even
want to
more
like
valuable.
publicly like tell people that like I've not had a great time and I've been really bad at coordinating with Boone, but I wanted to give it my all while I was here, and I want to tell you like let's do more things together in time, and let's keep this
Yeah,
conversation going. Like I wanna see this, like I wanna be part of like whatever you end up writing. Like if you're publishing a paper, you are doing
yeah,
something, like make sure I'm an academic, like make sure I'm part of that paper, make sure that you know what I mean, like we can do
absolutely.
this together. That
Yeah,
conversation can't just
I-
be industry, it also has to translate to
correct.
education and all of that stuff. So
Absolutely.
I imagine like your notes, like things we work on together can end up in universities when they're talking about feminism, when they're talking about menstrual health, when they're talking about
Yeah,
India. Like think
yeah,
about all of those
yeah.
contexts as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd be happy to be in touch with you once the toolkit progresses,
Definitely.
actually. We'd love your inputs. But for today, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for giving us your time on a
Yeah, of
Sunday.
course.
I hope your day improves, and I hope you keep well, mentally, physically, emotionally, and yeah, lots of
Thank
love.
you. Thank you so much. You take care and all the best. Keep doing awesome work and send me this live session. I'm gonna make notes from it myself because I think I said some things that I should write down
Yes,
now myself.
yes,
All
yes.
right. Bye. Take care. Bye, people.
Bye.
Thank you for being
Thank you
here.
everyone for
Of
joining.
course. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.